Hello guys, how are you?
I'm Hardeep Singh. Welcome back to your own YouTube channel. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test, and speaking, you got guesswork. Please, guys, participate in everyday listening and reading practice test to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Press the bell icon for the upcoming notifications. Don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams.
Part 1.
You will hear a woman showing two people around a pool and gym. You have 30 seconds to read questions 1 to 4.
Good evening, I'm Louise and I'll be showing you the complex.
Nice to meet you, Louise. I'm Wei Wei.
And I'm Terry.
The tour takes 20 to 30 minutes. Do you have time?
Sure.
No problem.
We always like to ask people who come here for the first time how they found out about us.
We work on Albert Street, not far away.
So you saw our new sign?
I must say I love the blue dolphin. But in fact, I didn't notice it until this evening.
Did you read about us online? We've had some great reviews.
No, I didn't.
I'm afraid not.
So,
A woman at work comes here and she loves it. She swims every lunchtime. I'm hoping to join her.
in winter, midday classes are popular. Or were you thinking of swimming by yourself?
I'm not sure. Taking a class could be more motivating than doing laps on my own.
True. The number one reason people stop going to a pool or a gym is not the cost, nor even the time, but a lack of enthusiasm. They just run out of steam.
Speaking of steam, you've got a sauna here, haven't you?
Yes, we have. It's a great place to relax. But let's have a look at the main pool first. Recently renovated, this 8-lane, 25-metre pool is heated to 27 degrees Celsius.
Sounds nice.
The children's pool next door is even warmer at 31.
Charlie might like that, Wei Wei.
Does your son Charlie swim, Terry?
Actually, Charlie is not my son.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
It's a common mistake. We're from the same country and we work for the same company, but we're not a couple.
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have 30 seconds to read questions 5 to 10.
Well, I've shown you everything.
It certainly is impressive. I think I could easily hang out and work out here.
So let's talk about membership.
I think I'll start with a weekly membership. I'm all too conscious of my limitations, and you're right about people giving up. I've done that before. I'd like to sign up for the water polo class between 12 and 1, and for the stroke correction class.
I teach stroke correction on Saturdays. You may find it's a struggle at first, but within a few lessons, your speed will really increase. Most swimmers have no idea that the way they use their arms affects their performance.
Do you also work on swimmers' legs? Mine are very weak.
That's for another class called kick correction. What about classes for Charlie?
Charlie's in a wheelchair at the moment. He's just had an operation. I see you've got wheelchair access through the parking lot and a ramp into the children's pool. He'll need both of those. Maybe once Charlie's comfortable in the water, we'll think about classes.
I do hope so. What about you, Terry?
I think I'll go for an annual membership. I'm moving into an apartment just 2 blocks away this weekend. First up, I'd like to take the Monday night weight training class in the gym. And I noticed your offer of a personal trainer for a 1-month trial. Once my personal trainer has developed a program for me, I'm sure I'll take some more classes.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
You will hear a man talking about plans to redevelop a wharf. Before you listen, you have 30 seconds to read questions 11 to 16.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming to this forum about the redevelopment of Queen's Wharf. I hope you've got some tea or coffee and you've put your phones on silent. Right. Essentially, we're now dealing with the final phase of the project. If you've looked at the plans, you'll have noticed that a couple of changes have been made to the previous ones, the most noticeable being the removal of accommodation. You may recall that the original developer went bankrupt. When Cato and Brown took the project over, they scaled things down. As a result, there are no apartments on the second floor of the wharf. In fact, there won't be a second floor at all. I'm sure a fair few of you will applaud this decision, since you thought you'd lose your harbour views. What else has been scrapped? Oh yes, the 4th jetty for water taxis. It seems the contract with Fletcher's Taxis has been amended so vessels can dock at any of the 3 jetties as long as no ferry is within 5 minutes of arrival. Depending on your feedback, there are some other features of the plan that Cato and Brown may yet dispense with. For instance, the canopy extension was highly controversial in the first consultation, and since the canopy doesn't go on until the very end, its size is yet to be determined. It has to cover the existing structure, but whether it goes out over the bus shelter is another matter. The length of the bus shelter has also been reviewed. As many members of the public pointed out, there are only 2 buses that connect to this wharf, so a long shelter isn't necessary. Years ago there was no shelter at all. People used to wait inside the wharf building. However, the owners of the commercial space complained. Bus passengers rarely bought anything more than a newspaper or a chocolate bar, and there were instances of shoplifting. The owners also got tired of children who rode their bicycles and skateboards up and down the corridor, even though it was forbidden, so this is one reason why the corridor is absent from the latest plan. Let's move on to what's set in stone, so to speak, things that the Council insists upon. Cato and Brown are adding a 3rd jetty for the new ferry service to Green Island. With a permanent community on the island, it's profitable to run a ferry. The Council hopes the wharf will generate much of its own income, so this 3rd jetty is not up for discussion. Likewise, renovation has to be done to parts of the wharf that no longer meet safety standards, like the weathered or rotten posts and planks. And the wooden eastern walkway will be almost entirely replaced.
Before you listen to the rest of the talk, you have 30 seconds to read questions 17 to 20.
Now I'd like to spend a few minutes outlining the redesign of the space inside the wharf building. Firstly, public comment was made during the initial planning phase, so the only input we're asking for now relates to the public space where there used to be a bookshop and a food outlet. Probably toilets will go there, along with seats, vending machines, plants and sculptures. We're hoping local artists will submit ideas for artworks and that the plants will be native. As you can see from the plan, the size of the internal space remains the same, but the corridor will be subsumed into the floor space of the public area and the Thai restaurant in Shop 4. Access to the shops will be external only via the eastern and western walkways. I think the bicycle shop next to the cafe made a submission against external access, requesting the corridor be retained, but this was rejected. OK, let's have another drink while we discuss parking at the wharf.
The end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear a conversation between Carlos, Melissa, David and Simona. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 30. Okay, everyone. Let's look at what presentation tips we come up with for our next seminar, Melissa.
Okay, here's my first tip. Show up early. Some experienced presenters say that something good is bound to happen. I'm not sure about that, but...
Well, you may have a chance to head off some technical problem. Also, at the beginning, before you actually begin your presentation, people filter in slowly. It's a great time to introduce yourself.
Can't argue with that. Simona has some ideas about opening.
Have a strong opening. I picked up a few ideas for structuring your opening. First, never apologize. If you're worried the presentation won't go well, keep it to yourself and give it your best shot. Besides, people are usually too preoccupied with their own problems to notice yours.
I like that.
Open by addressing the following 3 questions. What's the problem? Who cares? What's your solution?
Excellent suggestion. David, you've gone quiet. Well, my next suggestion is PGP. That means that with every subtopic, you should move from the particular to the general and back to the particular. Even though the purpose of a subtopic is to convey the general information, bracing it with particulars is a good way to draw attention and promote retention.
I've got another one. This might not be a tip so much as a law. Give everyone at least one piece of paper. A piece of paper is a record from your presentation. People can use that to help recall the details of the presentation, or better yet, to tell others about it.
The next tip I have is know your audience. This is, of course, a general piece of advice for public speaking. See if you can find out what styles of information a presentation they are most familiar and comfortable with. Adapting your presentation to those styles will leave fewer barriers to the direct communication of your material.
I like that idea. We mentioned possible technical problems before.
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have 30 seconds to read questions
My next point is that maybe speakers should rethink the overhead projector. Is one really necessary?
I think that often is, but I agree with your basic point, Simona. Don't use one just because it's there. Maybe a good tip is to consider carefully what you're putting on your slides.
Yes, David, that's a very good point to make. Slide content is, well, you don't want too much, too little. Carlos?
Good points, both of you. Another point I have is to respect the audience. Don't condescend by dumbing down your lecture. Show them respect by saying what you believe and what you know to be the whole story.
I also have a point about humour. I think that humour is generally good, but be careful with it. Humour in a presentation works best when it actually drives the presentation forward. If you find you're using canned jokes that don't depend on the context of the presentation, eliminate them. David?
Maybe, Melissa, but always be very careful about jokes that put down a class of people. If you're going to alienate your audience, do it on the merits of your content.
Also, avoid masculine or even feminine pronouns as universals. It can be a nuisance to half the audience. As universals, use the plural they. The Oxford English Dictionary has allowed they as a gender-neutral singular pronoun for years.
Thanks, Simona. Thinking towards the end, take care with the questions. Many people judge the quality of your talk not by the 20 minutes of presentation, but on the 30 seconds you spend answering the question. Be sure to allow long pauses for questions. 10 seconds may seem like a long pause when you're at the front of the room, but it flows naturally from the audience's point of view.
Let people know you believe your material. Speak with conviction. Believing your subject matter is one of the best ways to speak more effectively.
Finish early, and something good is almost bound to happen. If nothing else happens, people will be able to leave early, and suddenly they'll have an extra couple of minutes to do things they didn't think they'd get to. People will really like you if you do that.
I think we have missed the key point. Practice. Practice over and over and over. If you can, record your presentation. Play it back and watch yourself. You'll discover 1,000 horrible things you never knew about yourself. Now watch it again without the sound. Why are your hands flying around like that? Now listen to it with the picture. Get rid of those ums. Now watch it at twice the normal speed. This emphasizes low-frequency cycles in your gestures. David, those were excellent points. I have one more, something quite simple, but often overlooked. I read that the two most dehydrating things you can do in a modern civilization are live presentations and air travel. I don't know if it's really true, but the message is that the way to stay sharp is to drink lots of water. Take care of your body, especially your voice. If possible, avoid alcohol too.
So, we've got to organise these points now.
The end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear a monologue on the subject of the Celts. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40. Welcome to this introductory lecture on the Celts. Who were the Celts? The Celts were an Indo-European group, that is, related linguistically to the Greeks, the Germanic peoples, certain Italic groups and peoples of the Indian subcontinent. They arose in Central Europe at the beginning of the first millennium BC, and were an iron-using and horse-rearing peoples. By the end of the first millennium BC, their cultural group had spread up and down the Danube and Rhine, taking in Gaul, Ireland and Britain, across Central Europe into northern Italy and northern Spain. Their roaming across Europe led some of the Celtic tribes to sack Rome in 390 BC, creating a fear of the northern barbarians that was to haunt Romans for hundreds of years to come. The Celts are defined archaeologically by the type sites of Hallstatt and Latene, the former being taken to relate to an earlier phase of cultural development. Hallstatt, an ancient salt mining area, was excavated from 1876 onwards by the Viennese Academy of Sciences, and provided the first classification of the prehistoric Celts. In 1858, the waters of Lake Neuchâtel in Switzerland sunk to a low level, revealing a large prehistoric settlement with a huge number of surviving artifacts. The nearby town of Latene gave its name to the second phase of Celtic cultural development. However, please note that these phases overlap through time and are defined according to geographical area. Let's look at each of these, taking the Hallstatt first. Hallstatt culture is characterized in 4 stages. A and B were during the Late Bronze Age, from about 1200 to 700 BC. C was in the Early Iron Age, from about 700 to 600 BC. D was from about 600 to 475 BC. The Hallstatt culture spanned Central Europe, with its centre in the area around Hallstatt in central Austria. There were 2 distinct cultural zones, the eastern and the western. At the start of the period, long-distance trade was already well established in copper and tin, the basic requirements for manufacture of bronze. From about 700 BC, trade in iron also became established. The Hallstatt area also already controlled the trade in salt, crucial when there were few other means to preserve food. Control of these 2 crucial trade goods, iron and salt, provided the basis for the accumulation of wealth and influence. From 800 BC, some burials of rich people can be identified in Central Europe, with grave goods such as wheeled wagons and iron swords. Hallstatt C saw the construction of fortified hilltop settlements to the north of the Alps. These had burial mounds holding very high-quality goods, such as vehicles and expensive imported treasures. By the time of the Hallstatt D period, these increasingly extravagant burial mounds were clustered around a few major hill forts to the southwest of the region. This suggests a development and a concentration of wealth and social power, possibly based on the development of Massilia, present-day Marseille, as a Greek trading port. The expansion of luxury trade brought greater opportunities for profit and helped to create an increasingly stratified society, with the development of a wealthy nobility. Over the period from 1846 to 1863, 1,000 graves were found at Hallstatt, with an astonishing range of artifacts, including clothing and salt mining equipment, as well as weapons, jewellery, pottery, and imported bronze vessels in the chieftains' graves. The Latene era was the time of Celtic expansion and migration, and the time of formation of the myths. The Latene culture is named after the site in Switzerland where it was first discovered. The Latene people were those known to the Romans as Gauls, originally found in an area from eastern France to Bohemia. The Latene culture spread rapidly from about 400 BC. The Latene Celts settled in Spain in 450 BC, in northern Italy in 400 BC, invaded Rome in 390 BC, invaded Greece in 279 BC, invaded Galatia in modern Turkey in 270 BC. By 200 BC, they occupied the lands that are now Britain, the Netherlands, Brittany, Belgium, Germany and Switzerland. There is much debate over how much of the expansion into Britain was achieved through invasion and settlement, and how much was the expression of cultural transfer that accompanied trade and reflected the commonality of kinship and language of many tribes. There is little evidence for actual migration of Latin people into Britain. Nevertheless, it does appear that the Latin culture was more militarily focused than the Hallstatt one. The Latin graves across Europe hold iron weapons, swords and spearheads, and wooden shields, as well as everyday items such as razors, yokes, cauldrons and jewellery.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
So guys, don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test and speaking, you got guesswork. Please guys, participate in everyday new IELTS listening and reading practice tests to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. For more IELTS material, visit my official website www.ieltsupdatesandrecentexams.com. The link is given below in the description. If you need PDF files of latest IELTS material, then please join my Telegram channel. So guys, please write your score below the comment section. Again, thanks for listening. God bless you all guys. Stay tuned, stay safe.